Olá, eu sou Natalie Unterstell.
E eu sou a Carol Prolo.
E esse é o Las Niñas, o seu podcast semanal sobre a crise do clima e o clima da crise. E hoje é dia 22 de outubro e a gente tem um episódio muito especial.
Pois é, a gente recebe hoje uma convidada que é pra lá de especial. Ela é a ex-secretária executiva da Convenção do Clima da ONU e foi a arquiteta do Acordo de Paris. Hoje é uma das vozes mais influentes na agenda global de ação climática, Christiana Figueres.
Christiana é da Costa Rica, fundadora do Global Optimism, ou otimismo global, autora do livro The Future We Choose, Futuro que a gente escolhe, e apresentadora do podcast Outrage and Optimism, que é mais ou menos assim, indignação e otimismo.
Uma boa dose de otimismo a gente está precisando, né?
E um aviso, a partir de agora, a gente vai falar em inglês com a Christiana. Se você preferir, nos acompanhe em vídeo para ter acesso à conversa com legendas. Let's do it. Christiana, we are just days away from COP30 in Belém. And, you know, despite all the geopolitical tensions, all the challenges that we have here in Brazil at the moment, we are truly happy to be welcoming the whole world into our home. It's really special for us, and it means so much to finally have like a COP in Latin America after such a long time.
And Peru was the last one, 2014.
Yeah, a long time ago. So happy to have you all here. And you know, it's right in the heart of the Amazon. It's really amazing. And we want Belém to succeed. We need Belém to succeed. So first question for you, if you could dream out loud for a moment, what would you love to see coming out of Belém, coming out of COP30? What would make you look back and say, yes, this was a turning point?
Well, many things, actually. Maybe you thought just one thing, but many. First of all, and I think this is already in the bag, it doesn't need to be a concern to anyone. First, the fact that we're going back to Latin America, but not just to any place, to the Amazon. That in and of itself is a huge statement. Because the fact is that although the technologies that can help address climate change, the energy technologies and the transport and the industrial technologies are growing exponentially and are very, very promising, the fact is that the entire land use sector is what I call una cenicienta, is the Cinderella of the whole process. And we haven't really worked on bringing that sector to the point where it ought to be and where it urgently needs to be. So I am delighted that the venue, the place that we're going to be, doesn't let us forget that. It doesn't let us forget that we have to protect our standing forests, that we have to recuperate degraded soils, that we have to move towards sustainable agriculture. So that to me already fills my heart with joy, that that's where we're going to be. And nobody can close their eyes and be blind to it. So I am delighted about that. I'm also delighted about the fact that the Brazilian COP presidency has been very intentional about reaching out to indigenous populations, which in the Pacific Islands are called First Nation populations, to invite them and engage them very specifically leading up to the COP and at the COP. That, again, is a first. Just like it's a first to have the COP in basically almost in the forest, it is also a first to have such political, authentic dedication to the rights and the livelihoods of indigenous populations. Because their protection of our natural resources, their protection of the forest, is what gives us today the little chance that we have of having any standing forest. So I am thoroughly delighted about that, and both of those are basically already in the bag. They're already guaranteed, so we don't need to worry about. We are there to celebrate that and deepen it, but it's not an effort to put it on the table. Efforts to put on the table, I think, are three. The first has to do with capital, because we're not seeing the financial flows going into either mitigation or adaptation, especially for the global south. The second needs to be about collaboration. Can we actually be much more collaborative than we have been? And the third needs to be about clarity. We have to have more clarity that we're moving beyond fossil fuels. We just have to have that increased clarity. So I think those are the three big outcomes, meta outcomes that we're all working toward for COP30, and a lot of progress being made on all of those three, but still a lot of work to do.
Well, following on that, Christiana, as you know, so many people will be traveling to Belém, communities, activists, scientists, and negotiators, and so on. And you often say that mindset is everything. So what kind of mindset you think people should bring to Belém? If you could speak directly to everyone who's packing their bags right now, what would you tell them?
One of my favorite questions. So for me, the mindset is that impossible is not a fact. It is an attitude. And because impossible is an attitude, possible is also an attitude. And so what I would invite everyone to avoid is to pack the Belém bags with the mindset that the current geopolitics is not going to allow for any progress. That is simply not true. It is simply not true. And we shouldn't act as though this is the very first time that we have geopolitics in the world. We always have geopolitics. And it's either of one flavor or the other, or more usually, it's many flavors at the same time. So we shouldn't be caught into the fallacy that the current flavor of geopolitics means that we can't make any progress. So if you thought that, I encourage you to leave that outside of your bag before you pack. Just leave it somewhere, maybe under your bed, or better yet, in the trash can. Because it's not helpful. It is simply not helpful. And also, it is not accurate. Because the fact is that there is so much progress already being done on decarbonization and on increase in adaptation. There's so much progress being done on financing. There's so much progress being done on technological progress, that all of that together represents not just huge progress since the signing of the Paris Agreement 10 years ago, but also an incredibly rich and promising ground for even more progress over the next 5 years. And so my invitation is for all of us to go pack our bags to Belém with a mindset of possibility. Not guarantee, because nobody can guarantee anything, but with an open, listening heart and mind, with a mindset that says, let us go and explore what is possible. Under current conditions, yes, but there's always something possible under these conditions. So the mindset of possibility.
Christiana, talking about possibilities, I think this is such a great timing for us to be with you because, one of the issues that was historic in Dubai was the agreement around the global stock take of the Paris Agreement that we have to transition away from fossil fuels. All countries agree to that, including ours, Brazil. And of course, there's no button, unfortunately, that we can push and wow, this magically will happen. There is a process and it's not going to be an easy one. But at this very moment, what we are seeing, despite of geopolitics or with geopolitics included, that countries are sort of hesitating in some way. Brazil is a case. This is not new. Brazil has been investing to become one of the oil majors for decades. And this is now the time that those who invested were waiting for. But unfortunately, we are on
maybe
their
or
way.
maybe not.
Exactly. And, this past days, we've learned that the authorization to begin oil exploration research, at the mouth of the Amazon River was granted. To many people, this means opening a new fossil frontier right in the heart of the ocean in the Amazon. And of course, this is quite frustrating, especially because there were recent polls here in Brazil showing that 73% of the population is or was against this exploration. And of course, we were not heard and we spoke up, but we weren't heard. And the fact is that we feel that we are trapped in this logic of the past. I don't know if you know this, but Brazil's slogan since the 70s is "the oil is ours." So there's this sense of sovereignty attached to oil. And it's there's this deep belief that sovereignty comes from petroleum, not from protecting life, but from this exploration. So it's deeply seated in our culture. And I think just recently, 4 or 5 years ago, especially the youngsters, and of course, all other generations started to be very vocal about this, saying, well, we want some other slogans. We want something different for our future. But I want to ask you about your views on how do we break free from this and how we kind of proceed with optimism, with clarity, as you mentioned, but at the same time, really making sure that what we begun in Dubai becomes irreversible and just as a transition?
Well, I would not dare to venture into Brazilian domestic conversation. What I can do, and if it's helpful, is provide a global context for that conversation. The fact is that beginning to explore for oil anywhere in the world is a step in a direction that is losing its credence. The oil industry, the gas and oil industry, is already beginning to shrink since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What the global oil industry has done is invest its unprecedented profits not into more exploration, with very few exceptions, but rather into paying their shareholders and paying down their debt. That is really important because every oil field loses at least 6 to 7% of its resource per year. And so in order to maintain the extraction level, needs a constant investment into the access to the resource. And every year that access becomes more and more difficult, more and more expensive. And if you understand that situation of that industry, you add to that the fact that demand for oil has actually already plateaued around the world. It is not increasing. It has plateaued. And most analysts predict that it's actually going to go down and decrease. And if you add to that the fact that we already have confirmed oil, should we choose to use it, which we won't, but confirmed oil for the next 50 years of oil use at current levels, then what is the point of exploring for new oil when you know that from exploration to extraction, it's going to take at least 10 to 15 years? So we're talking about any oil field, large as it may be, and I understand that this has very impressive numbers, theoretically, has to be confirmed, but any oil field that would hope to begin extracting and selling 10 or 15 years from now. In my math, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is the year 2025. 10 years from now is going to be 2035. 15 years from now is going to be 2040. How much oil is going to be used on the international market by then? Very little. So you really have to understand, one thing is the domestic reality, understood, but I'm not going to step into that. The other is the international global reality of that industry. And should there be any aspiration to export that oil, there is very few hard facts that would support the attainment of that aspiration. If the aspiration is to use oil domestically, then my question is, well, if you continue to use oil domestically, then that means that you continue to pump that oil into a series of technologies in all sectors, energy generation, transport, industry. You continue to hold the operation of those technologies against the global trend. So it's a little bit like offering a wheelchair to a person who can no longer walk. You can say, yeah, but there are good wheelchairs. Sure, there are good wheelchairs, for sure. But is that really the way that you want to go? So, having said all of that, I think we also have to understand that President Lula is presiding over a very brittle alliance of political parties that go from one extreme over to the other extreme. And so he is trying to hold many of those opinions and interests and needs. He's trying to hold them together in some kind of coherence, certainly for the COP, but also for his reelection next year. So you cannot blame him for having two hands, the left hand out to the environmentalists and the right hand out to those who would want to explore for oil and gas. I wonder how he will feel about the need to hold this very brittle alliance should he be reelected in his second term. Would he feel that that is still necessary? Question mark.
A good one.
Well, I think that's the perfect link to my next question, Christiana, because as the executive secretary of the UNFCCC in Paris, you guided the negotiations that led to the Paris Agreement. And I think to many people, you were not only the architect of the Paris Agreement, but you are its heart and its soul.
Maybe its grandmother. How's that?
I think that's That's a good one. But I would even say that the Catholic Church should canonize you, because what you achieved in Paris, I think, was nothing short of a miracle, you know. I was there.
But with a lot of help from many
sure.
religious leaders, all of whom deserve canonization. But carry on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you know, I was there. I was following the negotiations as an advisor to the LDC group. And I remember that late night in Daba meeting when it really seemed impossible to bridge all the differences at the table. I honestly thought at that moment that it really wasn't going to happen. But watching you, you
My
know, through
dear
the
friend,
whole time.
oh ye of little faith. Faith.
Exactly. You know, you always had this aura, this kind of unshakable confidence and faith that somehow things would work out, and that came through and still does very clearly in your speeches. So my question to you is that, you know, 10 years later now, we see the Paris Agreement struggling a little bit with, you know, many countries not submitting their NDCs or their NDCs lacking ambition. So my question to you is, do you still feel that same optimism, that same faith in the Paris Agreement despite the fallbacks? And is there something we need to do to, correct the course in the Paris Agreement?
Oh, there's no need to correct the course, because the course is decarbonization by 2050. So that direction is set and it's not changing. And we don't swim up the river, we swim down the river. Las aguas no se devuelven, you know, you can't really force the waters up the river. So that direction is set. What I am concerned is about the pace of change. That I am definitely concerned about, because the transformation and the transition that we need is not occurring at the pace that we need. Now, how do I feel about that? Well, as you might suspect, I actually feel optimistic. Maybe you want to say cautiously optimistic, but let's call it pragmatically optimistic. For three reasons. First, in the competition between the dirty, polluting energy sources of the past and the clean, responsible energy sources of the future, there is no doubt that the very physics of each of those energy sources means that the energy sources, the clean, renewable energy sources of the future, are going to win out. Consider this. Every barrel of oil loses 2/3 of its capacity to produce energy to heat, wasted. 2/3. Compare that to electricity-based technologies, call them solar, electric motors, heat pumps, etc. They don't waste heat. They actually turn all of their input into electricity. So they deliver more human prosperity, more productivity, more industrial power, with less energy and at a lower cost, because those costs are coming down. Today, wind and solar are 80 and 90% cheaper than they were when we adopted the Paris Agreement, and they will continue to become cheaper. So physics is definitely on our side. Economics, also on our side. Consider that fossil fuels have to be extracted from the ground, from the oil fields, and then they're exhausted. They finish up. Now, admittedly, we have 50 years, as I told you, of confirmed reserves of oil, but every oil field eventually gets to the point where it's no longer commercially viable to use it. And so you have to continue finding new and new oil fields. So that resource has to be extracted and is always exhausted. It is not renewable. Whereas the electrotech industry that is based on renewables is not extracted, it is manufactured, and it is on a curve of constant improvement. Electric vehicles today are substantially better than yesterday, and tomorrow they will be substantially better. And so with solar panels, with wind turbines, etc., etc. And each doubling of deployment of any of these technologies drives the cost down by 20%. So that means that today already solar and wind are the cheapest new power almost everywhere on Earth. The cheapest. Cheaper than new oil fields. Solar and wind are already cheaper. And investment flows and capital investment is following that signal of cheaper and better results. And the third that may be surprising, I actually think that geopolitics is on our side. For the following reason, we all focus on, what is the U.S. administration doing and what are they bullying at the IMO and, all of this. Okay. Now, here's a different way of looking at geopolitics. 3/4 of the human population lives in countries that are dependent on importing fossil fuels. 3/4. That means 1/4 of the population lives in countries that export and who are the ones who are advantaged or were advantaged over the past 100 years. Today, 3/4 of humanity is still enslaved to having to use their foreign capital to buy fossil fuels, the price of which they do not control. They do not even influence, because the price of fossil fuels is determined by the cartel, otherwise known as OPEC. Now, do 3/4 of humanity want to continue to be enslaved to that? Or does every country want to turn to its own domestic energy services, wind, sun, the minerals necessary for it? And here is the really exciting part for the three of us who come from developing countries. The fact is that developing countries hold 70% of global solar and wind resources. 70% we have. And we also have half of the critical minerals that are necessary for the energy transition. So, are we looking at a geopolitical shift that is going to come hand in hand with the shift from old polluting energy to clean, cutting-edge energy, that is going to be produced in not just domestically for energy independence of every country, but mostly by the global south? Could this be, and I'm not saying that it's going to be, I don't have a crystal ball, but at least it's worth asking the question, is this the moment that we will look back on 20 years from now and go, wow, that is the moment in which the global south came up in its leadership, redefined what development is, and took so much of the global development in its hands, redefined for its own purposes, and not swallowed by the paradigms that the global north invented and that we've had to swallow? What if this is our moment? What if we're about to become 21 years of age?
Wow. I'm so excited about the next 10 years, because the past 10 years were amazing, but imagine the next 10.
Yeah.
They can be really, really good. Christiana, here at Las Niñas, we always close with what we call a refresco. I think the word is the same in Portuguese and in Spanish. And basically, it's something that refreshes us, that brings us joy and hope and recharging everything that we need, especially now going to Belém. So it could be anything, a song, a book, an idea, something you are seeing, whatever. So what would be your refresco now?
Two things. So I am incredibly blessed to live not only in the gorgeous country of Costa Rica, but I actually live directly on the beach, on the Pacific side. And so I just relish having the ocean under my toes every single day, and being able to fall asleep to the sound of the waves. And I just totally love that and miss it so much when I have to travel. Oceans definitely refresh me. And the other thing that refreshes me is the sound and the sight of scarlet macaws, sometimes called red macaws, which are these amazing, amazing birds that have very, very strong colors, yellow, blue, and red, which happen to be the three primary colors, that fly over my head constantly because I live in a macaw reproduction area. And they have an absolutely terrible noise, but they're absolutely beautiful. And every time that I see one or two or three, usually in pairs, unless it's the pair with the young bird, I'm just in such awe of nature. How on earth did nature produce this magnificent bird? How did that come to be? And they keep on reproducing, and every time I think like, well, maybe the next generation is not going to be as beautiful, but they are. And so I'm very attentive to this life cycle of the red macaws here, when they nest and when the young ones come and when they're pairing up, because they pair up for life. So I'm just thrilled. And when I happen to be late going out on the beach, because I usually go out at 4:30 or 5, and if I am a little bit late, I hear the macaws flying over me, and I go, whoop, hurry up, the macaws are already out there. So, so I guess my summary is nature. Nature is just so beautiful.
I remember the howler monkeys when we went to the retreat.
Lots of howler monkeys here too. Yep.
Good. Caro, quickly, what's your refresco this time?
I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to show it actually for anyone.
Oh, look how sweet. Thank you. Thank you.
For those who are listening to us, this is the book, The Future We Choose by Christiana Figueres and Tom Rivet-Carnac. And it's just really, really inspiring.
Great. Yeah, my refresco this time is adaptation and seeing how adaptation is being elevated at COP30. And I'm so excited about that. I think we're really almost there, like reframing adaptation, not as a failure to prevent, but really as, readiness to lead. And I think that's the spirit. So I'm very excited and seeing so many people all over, especially in Latin America, but all over the world, really like pushing for a new form of treating adaptation. I think it's really amazing.
Ladies, before we close, I wanted to let your listeners know that we are incredibly privileged in that the COP30 presidency has asked us to be the official podcast of COP30. Yeah. And so we have already launched that podcast. It is entitled Inside COP. And what we are trying to do there is to unpack the COP, because it is such a weird thing. And for those who haven't been in it for 40 years, as I have been, it's really very difficult to understand. So we're trying to unpack it and put it forward for people to understand and be able to appreciate what Brazil is doing over over the next few months. It is currently launched in English, but we are working very hard with a partner who we hope will translate it into Portuguese, because we think it is important for this to go out in Portuguese. But if you're interested in finding out what on earth is the COP and what is happening there and what are all these very weird terms and words and concepts that are being thrown around, I definitely recommend that you tune into Inside COP. And we will be dropping one episode every week until the COP starts, and then we will be dropping one episode every day with the progress of the COP. So if there are listeners interested in climate change and in the COP, that might be a really good resource for you.
Thank you so much, Christiana. And I'm sure there will be that are already, because people were very excited. I learned to, delighted to learn about that. And so good that everyone in the presidency team was really generous, I think, to really commit to this on a daily basis. This is going to be amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So great. Thank you so much. I think that's also a refresco.
It is.
Indeed, for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much. What a joy.
Thank you, ladies. Yeah. Thank you, ladies. And I hope to see you there.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank
you, Christiana. Have a good one.
Great.
Bye-bye. Bom, que delícia essa conversa, que alegria, que honra ter feito essa conversa com a Christiana e com você, Carol, logo antes da COP30. Muito obrigada a todos vocês que estão nos ouvindo.
E se você curtiu, dá um like, compartilha e depois não se esquece de se juntar ao Clube Las Niñas lá no Apoia-se.
Semana que vem tem mais, com muito otimismo, teimoso e pragmático, porque é assim que a gente vai continuar e avançar a transição e a adaptação. Então, até lá!
Tchau!